bulbs. Whoever succeeded in bringing electric light to every home in the land was guaranteed fame and fortune. And by the early 1880s, the most famous, most prodigious, most fiercely competitive inventor in the world had taken on the challenge. The American Thomas Alva Edison.
For Edison, invention was a passion. It's what he loved doing. He loved being in the laboratory. The first thing that drove that passion is that it was a lot of fun for Edison. I think that was the thing that he found most exciting, is that this was something he did well, and it allowed all of his creativity to come to the fore.
Edison is Mr. Electrical Invention. He's the man they trust. He's the man that they think can do anything. He's also the man who has his carefully cultivated connections with entrepreneurs, with people who are willing to put their cash where Edison's mouth is, so to speak, and back him in this sort of venture.
For Edison, the money was probably the least important reason. For Edison, the money was important for one reason: to allow him to do the next project.
Edison had assembled a group of young and talented engineers at a cutting-edge laboratory in New Jersey, 26 miles from Manhattan. Menlo Park would become the world's first research and development facility, allowing Edison's team to invent on an industrial scale.
They worked incredible hours. You know, one of them talked about how he hardly ever saw his children because he was in the lab all the time. But they knew they were in the midst of something really important, right? That if Edison succeeded, right, if they succeeded with Edison, that their futures were secure.
Edison's dream was to bring electric light to every home in the land. And with his team of engineers behind him and the vision of an electric future ahead, he launched his campaign. The race to bring electric light to the world was to play out in the great cities of the time: New York, Paris, London. Edison's Menlo Park team set about developing a totally different form of electric lamp, the incandescent light bulb. In fact, Edison's light bulb design wasn't all that new or unique. French, Russian, Belgian and British inventors had been perfecting similar bulbs for over 40 years. And one of them, an Englishman, Joseph Swan, had been developing his own version of an incandescent lamp. Both Swan and Edison's light bulbs work by passing an electric current through a filament. Now, a filament is a material in which the electric current flows through with more difficulty than it does through the copper wire in the rest of the circuit. And it relies on the idea of resistance. Now, inside this jar, I have a filament made out of ordinary pencil lead. And we can see what happens as I pass a current through it. Down at the atomic scale, the atoms in the filament impede the flow of electricity, so it takes more energy to force it through, and this energy is deposited in the filament as heat. Now, as it heats up, its resistance goes up, which again raises its temperature until it glows white hot. Now, one of the first materials Edison used for his filaments was platinum. With its relatively high melting point, platinum could be heated to a white-hot temperature without melting. It could also be stretched into thin strands, and the thinner the strand, the more resistance it offered to the current passing through it. But platinum was expensive and didn't offer enough resistance. The race was on to find a better alternative, and the solution came when the Menlo Park team switched to a method Swan was also developing, using a vacuum to stop cheaper carbon filaments from burning up too quickly. Edison and Swan tested all kinds of different materials for their filaments, everything from raw silk and parchment to cork. Edison even tested his engineer's beard hair. Eventually, he settled on bamboo fibre, while Swan used a treated cotton thread. Edison and Swan's light bulb designs were very similar. Eventually, they came to an agreement and went into partnership to sell light bulbs in the UK. Today, many people still believe that Edison alone invented the light bulb, while Swan has become a footnote in history. But his incandescent bulb was only part of Edison's strategy. He'd also invented an entire electrical system of sockets, cables and meters to go with it. And being a brilliant businessman, he'd developed a groundbreaking new way of distributing electricity. Edison knew that the key to making money from his system was to generate the electricity in a central station and then sell it to as many customers as possible. It seems obvious to us now, but until then, anyone who wanted to use electricity had to have their own noisy generator to make it. Edison's ambition was huge. He wanted to light the fastest growing and most exciting city in the world. New York. In the summer of 1882, Edison stood in a unique position at the center of 19th century science and invention. He'd patented a cutting-edge incandescent light bulb. He'd amassed an unprecedented knowledge of electrical engineering. And above all, he'd cultivated a reputation among the American public of being such a genius inventor that journalists hung on his every word. And the financial muscle of Wall Street was quick to throw itself behind his new ideas. His vision to electrify Manhattan, and then of course the rest of the world, was seemingly within his grasp. Because Edison and his team were about to launch their most expensive and risky project yet. America's first power station generating continuous direct current. Just before 3 p.m. on the 4th of September 1882, Thomas Edison, surrounded by a gaggle of bankers, dignitaries and reporters, entered J.P. Morgan's building right behind me, flicked one of the Edison patented switches, and 100 of his incandescent bulbs began to glow. Turning to a nearby journalist, he said, "I have accomplished all that I've promised." Half a mile away on Pearl Street, Edison's new power station, costing $500,000 and 4 years of hard work, had sprung into life.